everyone. Welcome to the audience of SheSight podcast series, where we interview amazing, fantastic women across the globe. And in this episode, this is She Scientist episode. I'm really delighted to have a wonderful Indian woman scientist who is currently in California, who is researching and contributing a lot to the field of biomedical as well as electrical engineering in developing immunoassay programs. I'm not a scientist, so it's better that she explains what she exactly does. Plus, what is more exciting and interesting for me is the fact that she is also a startup founder. Not all scientists actually enter into, starting a business or starting a startup. But we have this young woman Indian scientist who is also a startup founder. So let's put our hands together and welcome Miss Vinitha Thiyagarajan Upaassana. Hi, Vinitha. How are you today?
Hello, Dr. Chandra. It's a pleasure talking to you. First of all, I would like to start by saying thank you so much for the opportunity. And to reemphasize exactly as you just said, it's not very often that scientists get featured on media or magazines, let alone female scientists. So this is truly amazing and exciting for me, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing this conversation with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's precisely why SheSight has launched this series, She Scientist, because we believe that scientists are the real architects of the future world. So we need to feature and highlight, and that too, women. Yes, of course, women needs to be, or rather, to be amazed, or rather, amazing women must be featured. That's the whole objective. So let's not waste further time. I am so interested to know your background. How did you start off, and how did you end up becoming this scientist? And where did you come from? Tell us everything about your childhood and your growth journey so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, it definitely takes me back years now. I definitely started my educational journey back in India. I finished my undergraduate in electronics and communication engineering from Sri Krishna College of Engineering and Technology from Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. This was in 2014, and then I directly moved to University of Cincinnati here in the U.S. To pursue my PhD in electrical engineering with a biomedical specialization. I graduated in 2014. It took me a whole year of preparation to apply for my PhD. It was a direct leap right after my undergraduate, which is not very often and conventional again. But I think from a very young age, I always knew what I wanted to do. And I was very specific about pursuing my research journey and becoming a scientist. So 7 years later now, when I look back, I still don't know what gave me the courage to take that leap, except the passion I had towards research work and biotechnology. So my research itself is about development of rapid diagnostic tests. And I think all of us are extremely familiar with that term right after pandemic 2 years ago, which is essentially what I was developing in my PhD research work. They are very similar to pregnancy test strips and the diagnostic test strips that we all are aware of because of COVID. Which allows us to very rapidly and very quickly understand a positive or a negative result of any particular disease that we are interested in diagnosing. And most of my work throughout the 7 years of my research journey was with Center for Disease Control, and especially with NIOSH under CDC, which is very specific to occupational health. And I also worked with several other projects related to some of the industries and University of Cincinnati's research labs. That has been the core of my PhD research work so far, and I graduated just a year ago. 7 years seems like a very long time, but when I think about it right now, it is a truly roller coaster journey, and I'm very happy that I actually finish what I set out to do almost a decade ago at this point.
That's wonderful. So, do you know what exact scientist you wanted to be, and how did you choose that? And how did you design your career accordingly?
That is a fantastic question. So I guess going all the way back to my school, I would say. So I did my entire 14 years of my education in Avila Convent in Sababa Colony, again, Coimbatore. I think one of the most important aspect for me for being inspired to be a scientist at a very young age was to start with was the kind of teachers that I had, especially the kind of science teachers I had. I know it sounds very conventional, but although just historically, I was a very big nerd and a studious student even back in school. Uh, there definitely had to be a very natural inclination towards research and R&D for someone to be as passionate as I was at a very young age. And I think my very first love towards research started probably when I was in 8th or ninth grade. And it started because I specifically still remember I had a science teacher who loved just simply exposing us to uh, topics or subjects that were out of the normal syllabus. She would specifically ask us to go find out what is the most recent scientific technology or development that is absolutely shaking the world right now, and talk to the class or just talk to our peers for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes every single day. And I think I still remember when I started doing that project, I hated it. But what came out of it was my very first exposure towards nanofluidics and microfluidics, and what the very, very tiny world that is visible to us only under microscope or even nanoscopes are actually possible. So I guess that's when I started getting interested in it. But that is not to say that I knew anything about R&D or research at that time. Funnily enough, after I finished my schooling, I definitely wanted to pursue my career in nanotechnology, but there wasn't enough opportunities where I lived, or at least at that time, I think it was 2010, to specifically specialize in nanotechnology or nanofluidics or microfluidics for that matter. So I definitely took the easy route at that point and finished my electronics and communication engineering. But then my exposure towards the exact same area just kept increasing. And I found out there were more avenues. And by the time I graduated my undergrad, there were so many more opportunities, but definitely not in India. And again, funnily enough, at that point when I finished my undergrad, my motivation to move to the US was not even related to research at that point. Uh, I guess conventionally speaking, just like how a lot of women go through in India, and this is my story as well. Right after I finished my undergrad, my parents were absolutely not okay with me moving to the US or with me pursuing my PhD initially. I had to convince them a lot, and I had to actually reassure them of a lot of things related to my safety and living alone and moving to a completely new country altogether, which were all completely fair and totally acceptable fear they had for me as parents. And that by itself was another extremely important inspiration for me to move here because although my family, my immediate family, especially my parents, And everybody around have always been extremely supportive of the fact that I wanted to become a scientist, and they always encouraged me to do so. Society in general, when I was growing up, was definitely not supportive. And I think that is something almost every female scientist from India, or every female student for that matter from India, can actually relate with. And that was, again, a very, very important inspiration for me. And for the longest period of time, I was actually telling everyone that, the reason why I came to the US was not even because only I was interested in research work, or because I was great at being a scientist and loved doing R&D, but it was also to break generational curses, which has constantly haunted women for generations together at this point. So there is no better way of explaining this, other than saying that that was more of an impetus, that was more of an inspiration for me to do everything that I did right after that. Even in my PhD journey, no matter how difficult it got at different times, but at the same time, it was definitely worth it. Now that I'm done with it, I feel like what I learned through my PhD journey, and with all the R&D work and the different kinds of inventions that I was involved with, it's more of a life lesson that I will carry with me for the rest of my life, rather than just even scientific lessons. So that was generally my inspiration, and it continued being so, given the fact that it was not always very easy, but at the same time, I had a lot of people who supported me, and I don't think I would have been able to do anything I did without them at this point.
Wonderful. So, a couple of things which I noticed in your answer is that one, this is something which I hear from every woman scientist who comes to this forum, that she did have, she definitely did face some kind of a barrier when it comes to convincing her own family, or, the society where she comes from, to make them understand that, yes, I want to be a scientist and I am capable of becoming a scientist, just leave me alone. That's something which I hear quite often. Secondly, when you said about, I really love that spirit of yours when you said that the reason why you want to do this is also, why you want to complete this is also because you want to break that generational barriers, right? So that's quite inspiring. And I think girls of probably the next generation will not have so much of challenges as you, or maybe the previous generation of scientists would have faced. And we can hope to see more and more Nobel Prize winners, probably women winners, in the coming decades. That's let's hope for that. Now, bringing me on that note, let's talk about girls in STEM. When you shared your childhood story, you also spoke about how your teachers have inspired you to, enter into the science, right? So, what new things can we do as a world, especially in the field of education, to inspire more girls into STEM? What do you think that we can do?
Absolutely. I think that is a fantastic question, and something I often even think about when I look at how the scenario is in general.
This is very important. The teacher's role in inspiring students, and what else can we do? That's something which I'm keen to understand from your experience.
I think I must probably share this too. So my 14 years of my schooling was actually in a girls' school. And it was actually dedicated, historically, the school was dedicated towards empowering women. So I must say that, I'm not trying to say that that is one of the ways to do it, but the reason why it was, I think, when I compare myself with women and any of my other peers who studied with me in my own city, or come or have a similar background for that matter, I feel I had that extra edge where throughout my schooling, from a very, very young age, there was actually no reason for me to get discriminated just for practical reasons. I'm not saying that that was not happening outside of my school, it was definitely happening. It was happening everywhere and anywhere, and I can quote so many examples, which has caused me to be here at this point talking about it. But at the same time, there was also an edge that there was a lot of importance that was given to the fact that your competence matters more than your gender. And that underlying context was constantly driven in our school. And if I really think about it, almost all the credit for who I am today as a scientist or as even as a student actually goes back to my schooling rather than even any other educational background that I had after my schooling, because that foundation and that fundamental strength really, really matter. So I will say, just as in my own personal experience, we should first start by teaching our female children, or for the lack of a better word, I would say all the children, that competence matters and not your gender, not what you look like, or not what your color is, or what language you speak, or which kind of economical background you come from. Because I see increasingly, even in the schools, there is an intentional or sometimes unintentional bias towards children at a very young age, which is so unnecessary. And I've noticed that both in India and here in the US, I'm constantly conversing with my nieces and nephews. I've seen them grow, and I see that they just unintentionally tend to develop that bias within themselves from a young age. I feel like I was very unintentionally protected from some of it simply because I was in a girls' school. It has its own disadvantages, but just gleaning information from, or gleaning from my own personal experience, that's where it should start. And second of all, I think it is very important that even in our everyday conversations with children, we are extremely aware of and extremely conscious about how we talk to them and how we address them, and what we imply in every single conversation that we have as adults around them and in the way that we talk to them. Because I remember, even now, I don't know why I remember this, but even now, the things that were told to me when I was very young as a girl by a random stranger, that you know what, you're not supposed to laugh like this because you're a girl, you're not supposed to laugh loud because you're a girl, you're not supposed to wear this because you're a girl. These things, I remember them more even now, and I was probably 6 or 7, or I don't even remember how young I was when I was told all of these things. And that's what I think needs to stop. Even now I see people do that very unintentionally, almost as if that is very normal. They've started normalizing it, even in my opinion. There is increasing consciousness towards not doing this with younger generations and with more exposure to education. But I think all of us have to collectively decide that we're going to be very conscious about the language that we use with the children, and tell them that they can do whatever they want to do, and they can be whatever they want to be, especially female children. And that does not depend on how they look, how they speak, what color they are, what ethnic background they come from, or what their economical situation is. And I think if this message is reinforced in them at a very young age, it already creates a very, very important foundational strength for them for the rest of their journey, or even for the rest of their life.
Yes, exactly. And that's something, I mean, everybody has to talk about these biases as well. And only then the change can happen in the society. So, I mean, I would say probably we are in a far well-connected, more resourceful, or rather more information era where we can talk about these things openly, but at the same time we can be better aware as well. Whereas probably 15 years back, 20 years back, these kinds of facilities were not there, and the conditioning was happening right in everywhere, as per the previous whatever stereotypical expectations we had as a girl. Now let's talk about science now, back to your research work. And you mentioned that you have worked in designing rapid microfluidic diagnostic kits. So tell us about that experience and how you have been instrumental in contributing to development of those techniques and how your methods are currently getting used. I mean, everything about that.
Absolutely. It takes me back to a lot of good and bad memories, but I guess that's something every researcher has and every researcher goes through. So yes, I will start by saying that my entire research focus was always definitely related towards microfluidics, developing rapid diagnostic tests related to different kinds of infectious diseases, stress disorders, cardiac biomarkers, etc., etc. I can keep going on. And I will say that the most important novelty of what I worked on, especially now in our lab back in University of Cincinnati with my professor, Dr. Chongan, was specifically related to developing microfluidic devices which were made of plastic. I know all of us have seen rapid diagnostic tests, and if you remember anything about it, you may remember something that looks like a paper strip, very similar to a pregnancy test, or very similar to a COVID test that we all were forced to take 2 years ago. So it is very conventional for those kind of paper-based devices that are already present in the market. The novelty of my work was essentially to develop something that is highly, highly, highly sensitive to the effect that even a patient or a person who's exposed to the slightest concentration or the slightest amount of a particular disease related to COVID-19 or malaria or hormonal disorders or anything at all that we want to measure in our bloodstream or any other biosamples. I developed, or I especially worked in developing an extremely sensitive and rapid device, which will not only just say yes or no answer, but it will also tell you the exact quantity of those particular biomarkers that are present in the bloodstream. This is very important for chronic diseases rather than acute diseases. And by chronic diseases, I mean people who suffer from long-term stress disorders, long-term hormonal disorders, fertility disorders, anything that is related to biomarkers that needs to be regulated, even diabetes for that matter. There is constant monitoring that they have to do. I mean, if we ask any diabetes patient, I know every one of them would say that they are required to take and check their blood glucose level and their sugar levels almost every single day, if not every week.
That involves pricking needle every day.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. You got the point. That involves pricking. And that was going to be the next part of the novelty that I was going to talk about in my device. Usually, all of these devices will involve using blood, which will involve pricking, and they have to be using a needle. Even if it is a micro needle, they have to draw blood out of their system every single time, which is painful, which is definitely not sustainable in the long run. My device was especially focused on replacing blood with saliva because collecting saliva is painless. Collecting saliva is easier. It is less contagious. It does not spread, and it can also be disposed of much easier without the requirement of a biohazard bin or making sure of recycling the biohazard waste in a specific manner, etc., etc., etc. So my focus, the two very important novelty was that it's an extremely highly sensitive device that was invented for the very first time in the world, which would tell you the exact quantity, but also uses saliva instead of blood and makes your life easier, makes everybody's lives easier, I would say.
Oh my God, this is fantastic. I mean, this is, I don't know how to, congratulate you for actually working on this kind of a concept because, my both my parents, my mom as well as my dad, both of them have diabetes, and this is like a common thing every day, pricking and thing. But of course, your method, the saliva-based testing method, and you also mentioned it's not just for diabetes, but also for many other, a set of other chronic diseases. I mean, it's really wonderful, the kind of work that you have done so far, and I'm really excited to know when this will be commercialized, and then probably in the hands of people. I know you've just completed the work, so we are just waiting for that, right? So uh, hopefully it comes into the market very soon, so that people can use these kinds of easier diagnostic tools.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, just speaking of that, just to give you an information, we did work along with CDC and a couple of other industries which funded our project. So they, of course, own the patents for the projects, and there is FDA regulatory process that we all know about. But yes, it is definitely in the process of being commercialized, and I'm very sure it is going to probably. A few more years. I don't want to, please don't quote me on that because I don't know what the internal industry process is, but it is definitely in the pipeline, is what I would say.
Wonderful. Really glad to know that. I mean, I think these are the kinds of works that the world needs. It's an impact project, according to me. And another aspect, when you spoke about the journey of a woman scientist, I think it's not just. I mean, of course, this was your passion project, and you were so you I'm sure you would have faced a lot of hurdles and challenges to in order to actually reach the stage. I'm associated with Gender Innovations Lab, where we always talk about how gender sex analysis is important in any research work. So I would like you to just touch upon how gender sex intersectionality, if at all, was analyzed in terms of your research outputs, and how your device whether it has been is able to give the right inputs for all categories of people. Have you done that analysis? And it would be great if you can share some details on that.
Yeah, that is a great question. And yes, I think even with several of the case studies that we actually see, which gets released for different diagnostic devices, or even vaccines or drug development, or especially drugs for the most part, the population, or I should say the distribution of the population that is usually considered, at least for scientific reasons, more recently there has been more consideration towards having equal number of women and men in the entire population pool. And it is extremely important. And I think we've had this conversation internally a lot. Starting with saying that how in professional environments in corporate world or even in research labs or anywhere at all where women work, even the chairs that we sit on an everyday basis are generally supposed to be different than the structure of those chairs are supposed to be different than it is for men for our overall health. This is something very simple, but I don't think anybody even so much as even given a second thought to the fact that this does affect the overall posture for women. Women are supposed to be, or it is more, I would say it's more amiable and it's healthier for women to be supported in certain parts of their physical body when they are sitting down and working on something when compared to men's body. Even just starting with this as an example, all the way till where you just touched right now, related to having equal proportions and distribution of men and women in case studies. It has been increasingly considered, but I will say that 8 years ago, when I joined the research community, it was increasingly difficult to even find female volunteers who would give us the blood samples or saliva samples or their biosamples for us to be able to consider them for studies. There were a lot of incentives that were introduced by CDC and a lot of other institutional organizations to make that happen, but it's definitely not on par with how much we are able to do with men. And specifically for my study, I was not directly involved in the clinical analysis of the blood and the saliva samples. I was involved up to the point of consideration on what are the distribution and etc. that we have to consider. But it was taken over by the funding organization after that. And I'm very sure right now, even legally speaking, there is certain regulatory processes they have to go through in considering women. But I will say that in my own process, when we were designing the device and when we were designing the parameters that we had to consider for diagnosing certain levels, we are very specific in understanding what are the reference ranges, right? And again, that's where the problem goes. If you historically look at how much data we have for women on what are the gold standard reference ranges that we have to compare against, it's just so that our device would be more accurate and precisely fine-tuned for women compared to men, or to be on par with what we can do for male population, we still struggle even there. So I think the entire process, even for me, depended on what we historically had versus what I could do with it versus what I could contribute in making that a little bit better than it was earlier. So, in my opinion, I would say I was definitely not 100% able to fine tune and refine them specifically for women or the female population. And I would love to continue working towards it and contribute towards it. But it is at least better than when I joined the research community 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a great step, I would say. When you spoke about this issues of women, it is said that a lot of funding actually goes into all kinds of diseases. If men had those diseases, it would have been funded highest. But when it comes to women's health, it's one of the lowest priority funding, even clinical research and other things. So I think we need more of women scientists solving women's health, as well as we need more of women founders and startup founders to come out with solutions that is meant for women's not just health but every other aspect. And that's what the future requirement when it comes to startup world is. Now let's talk about startup. Your startup. Tell us more about your PerceiveNow.ai. Am I right? So I want to know, what is the connection between artificial intelligence and this immunoassay development scientist, which is, I don't find too much of connection, but you will have to explain that. Share us all about how you started this company and where you want to take it forward.
Oh, absolutely. And you're spot on in understanding that there is absolutely no connection between my research work and my startup. And in my case, it worked out to be the best scenario for me, because I think if it had been connected, just because I'm an immigrant here in the US, I would have had several legal problems being able to work on it and a lot of conflict of interest. But yeah, keeping that aside, Perceive Now, I'm the founder and director of Perceive Now, and I started working on it. Let me think, 6 years ago, 5 years ago now. I think ever since my childhood, I was always equally passionate about entrepreneurship as I was with science and research. And I think the biggest motivation for me there was my father. I think it was hands down my father and my mother, because they were the two most ideal business parents I had growing up. I was raised by business parents, and I've seen them doing business ever since I can remember them as my parents. So I sort of feel like I had an unfair advantage there, but I also was extremely passionate towards it, and something that I enjoyed doing it and I love doing it, and I would be doing it for the rest of my life. But my entrepreneurship journey itself definitely started 5 years ago. Perceive Now is an artificial intelligence based software platform, and it is specifically meant for C suite and D suite executives of technology companies, and for decision makers in financial institutions and private equity firms who are constantly looking to extract growth insights, market expansion insights, and technical diligence information from patents and publications. And to simplify this further, I would say that We essentially extract a lot of growth insights and market expansion insights from the millions and millions of patents and publications that get published every single day. We all know the volume and the velocity with which they are getting published recently. I shouldn't even say recently. For decades, that has been the case, and it has become almost humanly impossible for any buddy to sit down and read through, I don't know, hundreds of pages of patents and publications to extract relevant information or useful information from them. That is the most important problem that a lot of data analysts and technical due diligence analysts and strategists in companies go through and face every single day, and almost spend thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in trying to understand these important information and relevant information for growing their company and their business. But there is absolutely no existing solution so far which completely automates the process of extracting relevant business insights from patents and publications, and that is what we are working on. I have been working on it since 5 years, like I mentioned. I started my journey with the startup ecosystem in University of Cincinnati. Extremely grateful to several advisors that I had in University of Cincinnati. I must mention, starting with Dr. Thomas Dalziel, who was the executive director for Center for Entrepreneurship at that time, and until now, the executive director we have Ms. Kate Harmon, who have been and continue to be extremely supportive of my entrepreneurship journey. I started working on it 5 years ago, but we finished our journey right after our University of Cincinnati accelerators, and received our first pre-seed investment from a Silicon Valley accelerator, an investor last year, followed by being accepted in Generator Cincinnati. And right now we are a team of about 9 members, with 3 of our core team members working towards several different features that are very specific towards market growth insights and developing as cutting edge as it gets with ChatGPT modules, and very relevant to patents and publications.
Wonderful, nice. So, quick question: which one do you like? Is it AI or biotech?
Oh my God, that is a question I was so hoping you would not ask me.
Yeah, I got you there.
I don't think.
Let me make it a little more simpler, or rather difficult for you. Which of these technologies do you think is going to impact the human beings in the next decade more? Like, is it biotechnology or is it AI?
Oh, well, okay. Even more difficult. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I should say that I don't think they are two exclusive technologies that can be compared. There's a lot of artificial intelligence related biotechnology devices that are being developed, and I see an extreme overlap between them, especially in the recent times with the Internet of Things and being able to connect and manage patient data and being intuitive enough to help them with managing their own health and taking care of it on an everyday basis. So AI in healthcare is extremely large and huge. I've worked in that space too. And even when it comes to specific to Perceive now, if you look at the amount of research data that comes out of biotechnology devices and biotechnology I should probably say diagnostics, drug delivery, and anything related to the instrumentation that is generally used in biotechnology as well. In all of these 3 categories, if you look at what is very compelling recently is the fact that there is a lot of data that is getting generated. I mean, when you diagnose a patient, immediately you're getting a particular concentration. When you're administering a drug to a patient, you're going to be having to constantly checking what's happening right after that. So what are we going to do with this data has been the biggest question that is there are a lot of technologists have been pondering, and I think that is the crux of artificial intelligence itself. So even for us, just with the number of patents that are getting published around biotechnology, hundreds and thousands just on COVID-19 vaccine, which is a very simple example, all the way till some very rare diseases, which are extremely important for humankind to actually explore more into. The amount of data that is being generated, again, it is getting humanly impossible for anybody to do the manual extraction. So I don't think I can necessarily compare these two technologies and say one of them will conquer over the other, but I would rather say they both are complementing, and that is the right thing to, that is the right way to approach everything moving forward for the rest of the humankind, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's the right way. I think the future is going to be a place where not just AI or biotechnology, I would say all kinds of technology has to connect with each other, and all kinds of and I think human beings as well. The role of human beings would be probably in this world of chat GPT and AI and other things. The role of human beings could be probably this connecting role, bringing in, and a person like you who is working in biotechnology, who also understands AI, can come out with an innovative solution which will totally be different from someone who knows only artificial intelligence, right? So probably that is going to be massive when people start learning new things, and scientists like you come out with new technologies and new inventions, and that's what the world needs more, right? All right, so that brings me to the end of this wonderful conversation. I know we can continue talking about all of this for a long time, but due to time constraint, I will have to say bye-bye to this young, amazing woman scientist who is an Indian, who is right now in California in the Americas. And then I think what this is one last question is about you as a person. How do you manage your time, as well as what is it like being a scientist, and how does a day of a scientist look like?
Yeah, yes. I think you're asking me a question that I'm constantly working on all the time. Time management.
But in your case, I think you are also an entrepreneur. So scientist plus entrepreneur combination, how does that look like? I should alter
Absolutely. I can definitely say that much, but definitely one thing that I have learned over time for me is that many times, yes, it takes a lot of mental management before we actually get into actions towards anything at all is that we are aspiring to do. That's one thing, but probably one of the best advice that I received from my mentors and my advisors so far is the fact that it's better to act on something rather than thinking about it and wasting your time on it and rethinking about it and trying to understand if it's going to work out or not. The reason I say that is, and why I think it is very relevant to time management, is because oftentimes, or at least before I heard this advice, I would say I felt like I was most of the time preoccupied rather than actually being busy with work. I would be spending a lot of time thinking about something, thinking about doing something, thinking about if I should do it or not. Then I realized that if I actually did it, I would actually know if I should have done that or if I should not have done that. And if it did not work out, then I would just move to the next thing that I should be doing. So that is one of the best advice I actually received when it comes to time management. And the second thing, being a scientist and being an entrepreneur on an everyday basis, I would say the biggest challenge that I still have and I keep working on is being able to switch my brain's ability to move from one arena to the other constantly. Because this is something, of course, I'm passionate about equally, and I've always wanted to be a scientist and an entrepreneur, which helps helps the cost that I'm having to manage both of them. But at the same time, prioritizing what needs to happen on an everyday basis while having a big picture perspective or a big picture understanding of the milestones and goals that we have to achieve is very important. And I would say I would absolutely be it would be a shame if I did not actually mention this about my team. In my startup journey, I've had wonderful co-founders. I've had wonderful team members who have contributed towards the development of Perceive Now and where we are at today after 4 years of journey together. It's incredible when I think about it because we functioned remotely ever since we formed as a team for years together, and we've always been remote. Being able to manage that while being a scientist in person in the lab was probably the biggest advantage I had. But at the same time, being remote all the time, I had to count on my team members and the dedication and the passion they had, and their trust in my leadership and their contribution. I should say that continuous contribution towards everything that we are today as a business. So that is what really helped me. It is the people that I surrounded myself with which helped me manage my time better, rather than saying that I excelled at it, because I did not. I'm still trying to, and I'll constantly keep working on it. That's what I would say.
Okay, that summarizes. I think behind every successful woman there is a maid. That's what I always say. So in your case, behind every successful startup founder, there is an amazing team. So
100%, yeah.
yeah, so I think with that positive note, let's I'm once again thankful for your insights and perspectives, and I'm sure you would be achieving much glory in your professional careers, both as a scientist as well as an entrepreneur. And I really look forward to interacting and working with you probably in future in some ways, and maybe when you win more and more awards we can refeature you in SheSight.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for this opportunity. It was fantastic talking to you. And I'm so glad that you are focusing on female scientists, which the world really needs right now. Definitely young children, young females, they require the kind of encouragement and support that you are showing them by featuring all the successful female scientists and the accomplishments they have actually been able to achieve. So congratulations on that, and thank you so much. It was great talking to you, and definitely look forward to talking to you sometime soon again.